All right, what's going on? Today I'm going to show you some form validation while typing, or what many would call client side form validation. This is a cool way to add some extra user experience to your website and provide them immediate feedback rather than waiting for them to hit the submit button. So you'll see I'm on this really simple contact form. It takes a name, an email address, and a phone number. And the submit button right now, I can't even click it. If I do click it, it's just some default error messages. But if I start typing, subscribe at myyoutube.com. Oh, it turns green. So that's good feedback to the user that I got something that works. And then phone number, let's say 123 456 7890. And got a 10-digit phone number in there. So that's really good too. And this even takes different formats. So I'll show you how this kind of works. If people are putting hyphens in there, it doesn't take everything, but it gets probably what I would count as most use cases. So yeah, and then we can submit, and boom, submission has been received. Close out of that, and let's head over to our agenda. So this is the agenda today. We got the demo. I just showed you the demo, so that's already done. We're already done with step one. And then I'm going to just walk you through a really quick page setup on Webflow. There's not too much to do, but a couple little things I want to point out. We'll walk through the code. I'm not going to be doing all this code from scratch like I normally do. I'm going to try kind of showing you and walking through how the code works. And I will just provide a link so that you can go copy paste the code and use it at your own will. And then we'll go ahead and drop in the code and kind of make sure everything is hooked up and connected together. I even provide you some instructions on that code page. We'll fix any bugs. I can guarantee there's always going to be something. And then we win. All right. So let's go over to Webflow now. I have just a blank project here. Well, not blank, but um, very bare bones. We got our page wrapper, main wrapper. These don't have any styling to them. Our section, no styling. This is just normal kind of page setup. Page padding, just 5% on the left and right sides. We've got a container that's 100% width, max width of 34 rems, and then auto margined on the sides so that it's centered. We got vertical padding, 10 rem on the top and bottom, just to give it some breathing room, and then a heading right here. So we're going to start. Go ahead and drop in a form block. That's the first thing we're going to need. And don't need to make any changes to that, but immediately I noticed that we do want one more form element. So let's go ahead and open that form block. And we're going to get another field label. Drop that in there. And we're going to get another field input. Drop that in there. Okay, so we have name and email address. And then this one we want to be phone. And this one, let's go over here. ID, we'll make phone. This is going to come into play later. The name is email form. That's fine. They all have the name email form here. Name will be phone though here. These are your form settings, and these are the actual field settings. So we're just let's say like we can put some placeholder text 1, 2, 3. How you want the user to set it up. You can give them some hints already, right? And type not plain. It's going to be a phone number, and that's going to be required. So I think we're good with phone. Sometimes it changes the ID on you like that, so let's just put it back to phone. Here, the ID is email. That's good. We're going to change this type to email. We want that to be email type. And everything else looking good. This is plain. That's fine. Not required. So, John Doe. No. Webe. Yes, please. And let's see. For placeholder example at gmail.com. Okay. I don't think there's really anything else. We could style the form input if we want. And let's give it to these other ones as well. This one. And then we'll give the submit button its own class. All right. And now, I don't know, let me provide just like 4 pixels rounded corners. And we'll add some rounded corners on this button too. Change it up from the default blue. Sure, why not? I don't want to spend too much time with this. This is not the focus of the lesson. Let's make it kind of like match the hand. Give it some text. Color. All right, cool. Let's not spend any more time with that. Go ahead and publish. We don't need to right now, but just going to go ahead and publish. Let's go back to the agenda. So that's the Webflow page setup. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the code. Don't want you to be intimidated here. I wrote some modular code so you can kind of uh, add and or copy paste and delete things as your contact form changes. You may not have a phone section in there, or you may not have an email. I don't know, or you may add more. Uh, I know some people are interested in how to verify URLs as well. So maybe, if there's interest there, I can make another tutorial on that. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So we have a selector section here. This is just going to get the elements from the page. And those IDs that we specified, we're going to drop in here when we drop the code into Webflow. I'll show you how to do that. This is saying if none of these exist, so this is called the bang operator, and it's saying like, look, if you can't find email form, phone form, or submit form, then just return. We're going to exit the code and not execute anymore. And then we've got some tracker variables. Email is valid and phone is valid. These are default to false, but we're going to update them to true whenever the email or the phone is valid. I'll show you where that comes into play later. Now we have a bunch of helper functions that I wrote. So we have validate email. This takes in a value, which is going to be a string, and it's going to run what's called a regular expression against that string. And these are kind of black magic, voodoo magic, but not really. I'll show you this tool, regexr.com. You can put in a regular expression that you get from wherever Stack Overflow. There's a bunch of these things floating around that you can grab on the web. I did not write this myself. And you could just put in, so this is for an email, so k@k.com. Why is this not showing? Maybe I don't need the slashes. They don't copy over anyways. I think because I had a return in there is why. Test@gmail.com. So there, when it highlights blue, that means it's good to go. We found a match with the regular expression. And if I delete the M, co is still good, but .c is not good. .us, we got all sorts of crazy ones these days. Design, .uk, so it'll accept all sorts of different emails. But if we say like foo at bar.com, that doesn't match. So good. So we can feel pretty confident that this regular expression that we grabbed from the internet is going to work pretty well. And the rest of the code here is that we're saying we're calling value, and if it matches that email validation regular expression, then this function just returns true, otherwise return false. And this comes into play later. We'll use this helper function. Same thing with validate phone number. We've got another regular expression here. It's different. A lot of the matching cases I already put down here at the bottom, so you can see kind of what matches. If your use case has something that's not listed here, then you might need to find a different regular expression. And that you would just copy paste something different in for that line there. Anyways, we'll keep moving forward. All of these here are just changing. Well, I don't want to go over all of them. Let's say apply invalid and apply valid styles. We'll get into exactly styling these ourselves in a minute, but this is just going to add and remove classes based on how we want that input field to look. So if it's invalid, we want it to look at that red color, and if it's valid, we want to turn it green so the user knows like, okay, I've entered something that works here. So those two, that's what those two are doing. Very similar with the disable and enable submit button. We set this disable property to true um, when we want to disable it, and we add this class of submit disabled state. And when we want to enable it, we change that disabled property to false, and then we remove that class. Lastly, we have last helper function we have is update submit button, and this checks those tracker variables. Email is valid and phone is valid, and if both of those are true, then we enable the submit button. If either of those is false, then we disable the submit button. We don't want our user to be able to submit unless both of those are true. All right, and then lastly, this is probably where the majority of the work is done are these event listeners. I'm just going to focus on the first one for now, email form. So we have that email form that we got at the top here. That was from this line where we query and select our email form element. And we're going to add an event listener on there that listens for any input. So anytime I type a key on the keyboard, it's going to trigger an event. And that what's we're getting here is a callback function. So when that event is triggered, then we run a function. And what that's going to do is run some code for us. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get the value of what the user has entered. So what's in that box. We're going to run that. We're going to pass that to our validate email function, which again is up here. And that's going to return true or false. And if it returns true, then we know we've got a valid email. So we're going to set our tracker variable email is valid to true. And we're going to apply the valid styling to the email form. Otherwise, we're going to set the tracker variable to false, and we're going to apply the invalid styles to the email form. And then lastly, no matter what happens, we're going to update that submit button because we want it to be disabled or enabled depending on kind of whatever happens, right? And the phone form event listener here is actually the exact same thing. It's just with all the phone form field values. So I'm not going to explain that any further. And then lastly, this is actually just run the first time that the web page opens. We update submit button. That's going to disable the submit button from the get go because we don't want it to be enabled from the start, right? We want it to be disabled because the user hasn't entered anything yet. Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. These first two lines are the most important, of course. Just kidding. And we got our instructions. So copy and paste the JavaScript below inside script tags inside the before closing body section of the contact page. So I'm going back into Webflow now. I'm going to come in here and you might see I already have some code. I was testing things out. So I'll just go ahead and delete all that. But again, I'm in the before closing body section. I'm going to type script, close that, and then closing tag, and just paste everything in there. All right. And now, if I come back to the instruction, in Webflow, add IDs to your form input elements, including the submit button. And then step 3, update the code with the names of these IDs. So back in Webflow, so what I'm doing is I need to get what I put in here. So let's save that. And then name, the ID of this one is name. This one doesn't really matter because we're not checking any validation on the name. Email address has an ID of email. Phone has an ID of phone. And submit, we'll give it an ID of submit button. All right. Let's go back into our custom code. This one is just going to be email. And your spelling here is very important. Normally I would copy paste these values, but I don't know. I guess I'm pretty confident we'll get it right. If you don't, you'll get an error. It won't be working. So you'll know one way or another. And this little pound sign or hashtag just means that it's an ID. If this was a dot, that means it's a class, but we're working with IDs here. And let's go ahead and save that. So that completes step 3. And now we need to go to a style sheet in Webflow and add a form element with 2 inputs and a submit button. And we're going to give it these class names so that we can have these styles available to us when our code runs. So let's go back to Webflow. I'm just going to create a new page here. We'll call it style sheet. If you already have a style sheet, just use that one. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to just copy this form block here. Go back to the style sheet. Let's just drop it in. And what I want to do now, curious if I want to, let me just throw a container in there so it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, cool. What I'm going to do now is go back to the instructions, give one a class name of input valid state. So right now we're going to style our valid input state. And let's see. I don't want to confuse. Let's just delete all of these. I don't even need the labels in there. And then what I'm going to do is just drop input valid state as a combo class. And I'll copy and paste this. So we have input valid state. This is also input valid state, but we want input error state. So delete that one and add input error state to this one. And then submit disabled state. Come in here and add that as a combo class. Okay, and now let's get to styling. So input valid state. We want this to be nice and green. So I'll go ahead and start with the borders. Let's make it a cool, nice green here. I'm gonna do something that, not a designer here, but I do my best. This one will make really, really, really green, and we'll just bring the opacity down to like 10%. And then we also want to adjust the text, right? So let's make it nice and dark. And go into preview mode. So it's that nice dark green color when we have things going how we want them to. Okay, and we could also add a focus state too. We don't really have a way to indicate to the user that it's focused, and that's, if we're concerned with UX, that's probably one of the most important things in my opinion. So let's just make it really, really, really green. And now you can tell even when it's correct when you're focused. Okay. We'll do the same thing for the input error state here. Find a nice red. Let's see, we're doing the border here, so not too dark, but not too light. So just kind of the default border that we're going to give it. And then the background, we'll just go full red, but we'll bring the opacity down to something like 10%. And then let's get the text color. What did I do? I did like a nice dark kind of green for the valid one. And then let's not forget our focused state. Change the border to really, really red. A little less red than that. Okay, so let's see. Test, test. I like both of those. And submit. For this, all we're going to do for the disabled state is bring the whole opacity down to 50%. And we'll make the cursor just the arrow so that it doesn't look like you can click it there. And I think we're done with the style sheet. Let's go back to our home page. Now it just says we need to publish. Fingers crossed. All right, so okay.com. Look at that. It's turning green. Okay, turning green again there too. Let's see if we have an error. So we can't even click it. That's good. So hey, that's telling me I need to fix it. So now that's all fixed. This is great. Let's go ahead and submit. Please wait. Thank you. Your submission has been received. Thank you so much for watching. If this helps, it really helps me out. If you subscribe or like, follow me on Twitter, all those sorts of things. Trying to build this YouTube channel up and teach what I've learned over the last year of working with Webflow. So that's it. Hope if you use this in a project, please let me know. And again, description will be down below. So check there if you need to get any of the code or the clonable. All right. See ya.